Product Talk with Malthi.
Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Product Talk with Malthi. And today I am super excited to have with me a veteran product builder, Dr. Srikanth. Thank you, sir, for being on this show and welcome. All right. So, Dr. Srikanth's journey is nothing but a very, very stellar journey. Anything that would be very, very aspirational as well as inspirational. And we are going to deep dive into a lot of them. So he's been, a PhD in computer science a while back when it was not the very common thing to do. He's been a serial entrepreneur and he has led large organizations in a very senior capacity of leading their boards, right? Technologist, strategist, and now he's on the other side of the table where he is now an investor. And he's basically, a lot of startups are benefiting with the wisdom that he's bringing onto the table. And beyond that, one area which is probably common between me and him is also teaching, right? He is also a professor associated with many universities. So, you know that there is a lot that we are going to deep dive today as part of this conversation, right? So, thank you, sir, again. So let me start with, you've been a technologist, you've been a strategy leader, you've been on the operation side, and now for many years you've been on the, as an investor, and you're also teaching. So, what I would like you to ask is that how do you think that the technology has evolved, and how has that influenced the product journey in the last few decades?
Good question, Malthi. I'll have to dig deep, but I think I sent you a podcast earlier. I think I covered a little bit on that, and you can also leverage it for your purposes. When
Sure.
I landed up in the US in 1984, it was very exciting because the world was just opening up in terms of computer science. And I was very fortunate that after IIT Madras, I landed up at UIUC, which is one of the best schools in computer science. And I'm very, very thankful to both institutions for giving me a lot of inputs, education, and also kind of making me well-rounded and pragmatic, because that's very important. And that's the one thing I realized when I went there. So many cool people, so much cool stuff. I was walking down the street one day and I meet a Nobel Prize winner, John Bardeen, who's a prof at UIUC, and I said, I didn't know what to say. I said, hello, Bardeen, sir. And all. He said, don't call me sir, just call me John. Okay, so that was baptism in a very nice way, and I was very fortunate that I worked on very, very interesting things when I was doing my MS PhD. I got a chance to work with Bill Joy on some open source early projects, work on the UNIX operating system, and as luck would have it, I was also part of the NCSA where we were doing Mosaic, which was the first browser, and I was part of the team that wrote the first HTML parser in there. Now everyone uses the browser. Then obviously was part of the RPC stack, then part of the early X Windows movement, which of course got subsumed by the browser later because, so from a mainframe, we were moving to client server. We were actually looking at Unix as an operating system, which is a very cool operating system. I still love it. I still love C, and ended up writing the first, being part of the team which did the first integrated software development environment called HP SoftBench. Worked on the very first DevOps platform called ClearCase in the early days. It used to be called Dizzy from Apollo because HP acquired Apollo, and I was at HP after PhD, so it was exciting. Worked with a phenomenal bunch of people, including Marty Kagan, whom we'll talk about later, building a really cool platform for developers and people who wanted to kind of use C and C++ very easily. We ended up actually catering to 3 or 4 languages there, and a bunch of lovely hardware companies actually licensed this product and made it a standard. And over a period of time, it evolved. IBM went off with Eclipse. HP, as usual, kind of may have killed it. It was such a lovely product because it became more hardware oriented and became more consulting oriented. So that flavor was lost. But it was exciting times because, I mean, first you get a chance to kind of work with all the leaders and you work with really smart people. And then you end up in the valley where you can actually just walk in and talk. And Scott McNeely and Bill Joy might be in a Chili's where you can just hang out and absorb stuff from them. It was early days where time, the organization was also starting up. So we had some really good veterans like Suhas Patil, Kanwal Rekhi, more from the hardware side in those days, but they were there, and Vinod Khosla. So it was basically very heady days. So, and as we morphed through that, and as we kind of started looking at how software itself would be architected, because you wanted it to be in manageable pieces yet connected, right? So then came the services oriented architecture, then came code generators. Obviously, along the way, Java happened. Then we came back, and that first startup journey was so exciting because I also got to bootstrap a company, built a fantastic team, hit revenues of about $21 million, took in some VC money at the right time. Then we came out. Of course, the Y2K crash did not help because all our valuations went down, but it was a fantastic ride. And so I'd seen all of that. So client server, the OS morphing, client server to thin clients, security, and the world was ready, right, in terms of the next revolution. Along that, at that particular time, we also saw early aspects of cloud beginning to happen, where people were hosting stuff, including Oracle, PeopleSoft, and they were actually offering it to their customers. So the SaaS business model, I'm not talking about SaaS the way it is now, was also happening. So once we exited, at least I exited the company, the rest of the guys remained in the valley. I always wanted to come back to India. So this was the right time, because during my first startup, my son had an incident where he's a paraplegic now because of the emergency at Stanford, and they muffed up, unfortunately. So call it karma or whatever. So my daughter was growing up in India. So I said, okay, this is done. My obligations to all my employees, my customers is done. So let me actually come back to India. And somewhere along the way, when I was at HP, we also were very close to HCL, because HP HCL had a partnership. So I was also helping out remotely. And when I decided to come back, Arjun and Ajay and Shiv basically said, if you're coming back, you should come work for us. I said, cool. So I landed up, and just like that, I landed up, and they gave me a very, very important portfolio, which was that of a CTO, as well as to kind of figure out strategy and how to kind of refactor stuff, because they were into doing so many things. And I said, what I know really well is basically software. So I'll just focus on that and figure out what to do. So those were 2 good, exciting years where I learned till I got poached by Cognizant as their first worldwide CTO. Went there, and I actually got a chance to rejig that in terms of centers of excellence, productizing services, components, so that we could actually deliver better solutions to our enterprise customers. So that happened. And then I was kind of bored. I said, like, listen, this service company is slightly bored. Let me actually go back to my basics, and I'll build a product company again. So I was lucky that a bunch of guys I knew came back and said, hey, if you are free, then we'd love to have you. Can you build this fintech product? So that was the first time that I moved from doing a very techie-oriented product, or techie, or tech for tech product, to basically a business product. So that was a kind of a mind shift for me also, because now I had to understand who the users were, right? So your classic product management was very simple. You kind of put your PRD, and then it's a living document, and then it kind of expands. You've been through that thing, and in those days it was a little bit more discreet. And then with the app, all these faster iterations, it became much more continuous with agile and scrum, and we were delivering things a lot faster than we were, say, in the late 80s, early 90s. So this was a good opportunity where I could actually interact with customers on video calls, on Skype, and basically kind of figure out, okay, is the UI right, or is the experience right? Because that became so huge, especially when it comes to the enterprise. Because if you miss that, it doesn't matter what you do, it becomes a back office product. And so that was the first time the light bulb went off in my head, saying, you know what, consumerization of the enterprise is where it's going to be. And as I told you, I just came back 2 days ago from the Persistent annual general body meeting. They've crossed $1 billion in revenue. The market cap is north of $7 billion. It's kind of be part of that journey. And quite a bit of it was also product management, Malthi, because the startups needed that guidance. They needed that seniority. They would raise money, but like straight away, those guys, the VCs would say, you know, these guys are good. Work with them, because they will push you to kind of do the right things. So a lot of successful companies were supported by Persistent, which in the valley, which went on and did great things, right? And so that ecosystem continues to flourish like a virtuous cycle. And after Persistent, I said, you know what, let me go give back. So I went and set up the IIT Bhubaneswar's computer science program from scratch. Did the courses, hired the profs. My dad was not well. He had retired as chief secretary of Odisha, so I had to go take care of him too. So it all worked out beautifully for a couple of years till he recovered. And then I said, you know what, I would go back to my first Kida, which is startups. And I don't think I'm to do a startup myself now. So the obvious choice was to join a venture capital firm, and the opportunity came along just like it happens with me. Ashish and I were doing our first startups in the valley, and he said like, "Hey, if you're cool, then come join me as a partner." I said like, "I'll join you as a venture partner first because I want to understand this whole VC business because I'm a first principles guy." So that was a great stint. We did a bunch of cool companies. I can name a few like Red Bus, Make My Trip, SMS Gupshup, What Fix, More Engage. We missed a few, like I had brought Postman to the table, but we missed that. But I mentored Postman too. I got Hasura to the table, but they missed that because somewhere in Helion they were also not as techy. That's what I feel. Okay. And they were not as entrepreneurial, okay, because they had not done that, and I empathize with them. But it was a great innings. We did ID Fresh, we did Big Basket, we did Taxi for Sure, which is Ola. I mean, there were some phenomenal companies which are still going because of that. And
Yeah,
then,
those are some big names.
yeah, then partnership decided to break up. It typically happens with some VC firms, which was unfortunate because that was a bang up team. I mean, you had some brilliant people there. Especially you had Ashish, you had Ritesh, you had Alok, you had Sanjeev, you had Kamal. So we had all aspects covered, but sometimes it doesn't work out. As my good friend Vani says, any VC is like a family. Sometimes it falls apart and sometimes it stays together. And as I was coming out, I thought, what do I do next? And as luck would have it, opportunity came looking for me, which is through Venture East. And Venture East, I've been associated with remotely for a long time because all of the partners there were seniors from school as well as from IITs. So HPS, Hyderabad Public School, great alums, and then IIT Madras, and then and Sid, who's one of the partners, was also a PhD like me. So it was again a very cool thing, and we've done some really cool companies there too, which you will know. So they did companies like Land Pharma, Ocean Sparkle. They also did a company called Moss Chip, which was the first fabulous semiconductor play. Current portfolio has some phenomenal companies like Zago, which just went public recently. A couple more companies are going to go public. We have in battery tech, we have a company called Loham, which focuses on recycling. We had an edtech company called iNurture, which we exited from, which was doing well. We had Indus OS, which was the first operating system, which got acquired by PhonePe, and they're doing well. Hopefully, they go on and do really nice things. We have Infinite Uptime, which is a very interesting product for manufacturing 4.0, rotary component failure using digital twinning and AI and machine learning. So when I'm telling you all this, you just understand how complicated it has become to be a product manager. You have to have your tentacles in everything and yet be kind of grounded, right? Again, it was very interesting. With all these companies, you get involved very early, so you can actually help define their product roadmap, help them in a bunch of ways by getting the right talent in, maybe introducing them to friendly customers, because the whole product game has changed from what it was before and what it is now. So this is it. I mean, I hope that summarizes it to some extent.
Yes, wow, that's like, I mean, you have kind of, I would say, just done the full circle, and it is amazingly inspiring. And yes, I mean, I started my journey about like 2.5 decades back, and yes, yeah, when you were talking about those CDs and discs and stuff like that, I don't think in today's generation anybody would have seen the floppy disk, right? And probably
There used to be big floppies, there used to be small floppies, there used to be
correct.
cartridges, big cartridges, then it became small cartridges called DAT. And I remember when
Yes,
we released a product, you know how testing of product after release was. We would actually ship it in a box, okay,
yes, yes,
to another location of ours, and we will
right.
receive it, okay. and we will have servers just like it was in the customers thing, and we'll look at all the checklist because there'll be a checklist, tick 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 tick. Then you install the cartridges and basically go through all the installation scripts. Lot of it was written in Corn shell, okay, shell scripts, and a lot of it was actually kind of archiving was done using tar and untar, right? And you'll actually be doing, if there's enough disk space, is there temp? Because in those days, shared libraries had not come out on Unix. Yet there was still one big problem, because the way I look at, and it was a problem even then, right? So you have your product out there somewhere, and users are using it. When they file complaints, right? Typically, it is done. It is typically done in a separate repository, okay, with different tags. And I still feel frustrated because you're using Teams, you're using all these kind of products, but it still has not come together well, at least in my opinion. Still, there are
Yeah.
gaps.
You also mentioned that you have, worked with some of the product gurus like Marty Kagan. For example, when I started my journey, I remember back in 2008, 2009, I would look at that SVPG website, go to some of these community events, right? So, how has been your experience working with him? Especially his books like Inspired is something which I tell any aspiring product managers should be
Yeah,
a
yeah,
first
yeah,
book to
yeah.
go
I,
for.
I'll tell you my experience. So
Uh-huh.
I showed up as a PhD student, and some of the work that I'd done, actually, you'll be kind of amazed. So what my thesis was about cooperative distributed problem solving. Okay, so what it was there was several knowledge bases. Okay, and a problem would be actually distributed to all of them. And this was AI and machine learning in a very primitive standpoint. So each one would
Uh-huh.
solve it and post it to the blackboard, and it will kind of propagate, and then the final solution. Obviously, it was a toy environment, right? It was not a real environment that time. So I was really proud about my code, and PhD mil gaya, let me go there. And he took one look at it and said, you know what? This kind of code, I mean, is crappy. Okay. The second thing was you're
Okay.
not able to articulate what you're actually building. It's actually a very cool problem, but you're not able to articulate. So today, when I reflect back and I talk about these LLMs, right? In a way, what I was building was static LLMs and was trying to connect them all together to solve some problems, right? And very primitive kind of protocols, etc., even to post, and everything I had to do in a kludgy way because I was learning sockets. How do you send information between two machines? Because in my mind, I said it could be two machines, right? I was thinking that way. So he took me back, and he said, the first thing you need to do is start communicating well. You got a nugget of an idea, and that's what you got to stick to. So focus on that, and then from there you build. So that was baptism by fire. He really loved me. Actually, he still does. Okay, and so I learned at the foot of the guru, because he was a brilliant guy. He came out of UC Santa Cruz, and he was at HP Labs, and that's how we met. And he was given the charge of this product. He said, get out of HP Labs, take all these guys with you, and go to some place like Fort Collins, Colorado, and build it. Okay? Okay, we all showed up, and so many discussions, so many. In those days, it was basically a whiteboard. I think markers also not there. I'm trying to remember if it was there. Probably markers also not there. We had slides with plastic slides on which we would HP printer
Oh,
and
yes,
print
yes, on the projector.
on the black projector. So it was kind of crazy stuff, right? And
Right.
yet it came together beautifully, because that's how he said, you got to think of a product like your baby, right? First thing is you need to make sure that your product is viewed consistently by everyone, which is the messaging.
Yeah.
The second thing he said was you need to actually kind of break it down such that for an engineer it's easy to understand, for a product marketing person it's easy to understand, for a product management person who that's he said me is easy to understand. And so many times I'd say, what is this role, product manager? What do you typically do? You seem to be, in fact, I told him, you seem to be bullshitting a lot, going and talking here, there, and all, right? Because you're thinking like engineers. He said, no, it's very important. And as you go through this product release, I will make sure that you learn every bit of it, right? And that's exactly what he did. He made me go out and speak. He made me go to the customer site and say, that guy is giving us the most problem. You go there and find out what the problem is. And of course, I was a kid, so the customer would also kind of tone down. He would kind of abuse me too much. Here's this kind of weird looking guy wearing a tie and coming and all that. I remember. And then I used to tell Marty, I don't like wearing ties. I'm a t-shirt and shorts guy. He said, wear trousers, don't wear shorts, and at least wear shoes and go. So that's how that happened. But very interesting discussions with customers. Then and I kind of followed his dictum. He said, like, listen to them very carefully. Okay, if you don't understand something, you ask them, because don't come rushing back. That was one very important lesson. So that he said that is what a product manager does. He actually gets inbound stuff from customers.
Right.
Then he figures out what the outbound messaging should be in priority, because you can't do everything. And he also does the communication to the customers whose problems are not being addressed now. It may be addressed later, so that they are happy, right? So just think through that thinking. So
So,
I learned so much in terms of how not to lose valuable information, bring it back, and what are the usability, user experience issues. Because on our customer side, if they were engineering customers, like for example Honeywell or Siemens or whatever, they got it because they spoke our language, right? But if it is a bank, if it's an insurance company, right, they don't speak our language. So that is where that role of product manager became so critical. He was such a open, cool guy. So
yeah.
inspired, transformed, and all are, I mean, they're gospels, right? At least as far as
Absolutely,
I'm concerned.
absolutely. And
So,
very, very timeless classics, right? So for
and,
you,
and
it
he,
is on the job, imbibing all the goodness of, customer empathy, first principles thinking, being receptive, being observing your customers, and being that orchestrator to talk to, not only your engineering, product marketing, but,
yeah, yeah. So
looking at
the
all of
project,
them was,
that's when I
yes.
realized how important that role is. So now when I look back and say, what's a product? So we coined something called FLURPS:
Uh-huh.
functionality, localizability, usability, user experience, reliability, performance, and supportability. People forget supportability. If your product cannot be supported well, you're done, right? So these were all aspects that came into what is called a PRD. So
Correct.
non-functional requirements were as important as functional requirements.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, imagine you're doing a payment, and if it is going to take, let's say, 10 seconds for you to do, you have already lost your customer. If your website takes, so your latency, your availability, your performance, all that is like extremely, extremely important. So that's kind of very, very interesting, right? And you have kind of did this quite some time back. Then you did your own startups, and now today, when you're sitting on the other side of the table, when you are, looking at startups. So I in fact had a bunch of different questions because there's just so much I can discuss with you. So can you walk me through a startup story? Where you have invested. How did you look at what were their likelihood? What were some of the parameters that you thought that this is something that hits with me? We should invest in this. What would be any one of the startups that you want to talk about?
So I mean, I can do several, but what flavor of startup would you like? Then we can actually talk about it.
I mean, something where, let's say, at an initial ideation stage, and how did they kind of take it up? Let's say, probably anything around unique, their business model, or the simplicity of the product that kind of hit you when you were kind of looking at a startup. It could be anything. You can choose it.
I think the simplicity of a product that struck me very early on was
Uh-huh.
something called MediBuddy, which came out of IIT Madras. So
Okay.
what they do was use basic AI, NLP, and reasoning to
Mm-hmm.
become a medical assistant of sorts and
Mm-hmm.
connect doctors on in a peer-to-peer basis, not like Practo, which was very static. Here, there was a lot of good stuff happening in terms of back and forth and coming up with a diagnosis, right? And initially, I thought this will be a fantastic way to actually kind of provide healthcare to remote areas wherever, of course, you needed connectivity, but you could also have what is called smaller databases, which could be local, right? Which could actually do the diagnosis right there. And so we had
Mm-hmm.
thought, when you're online, you're online. When you're offline, how do you kind of handle stuff? And then how do you do a proper handoff in terms of a process for some serious cases? And how do you kind of. So Practo was not that. This was what was going to be. And we had two really smart kids, Satish and Enba, who actually were working on it. And then a real use case came up because Chennai had floods. I don't remember
Yes.
which year it was, maybe
This was 4 years
2014.
back now? Yeah.
No, no, there was this bigger flood which happened in 2015 or 2016, right around the time I actually put cash into it, and that was so beautiful. I was flying, I couldn't fly to Chennai, and they were putting out these things saying that, hey, Medibuddy is actually helping people, even medicines, diagnosis, because people were falling sick, they needed stuff, and there was a wellness aspect in terms of food being delivered. So, hey, that was such a cool thing. It was simple. These guys were passionate, and they did it. Another simple thing was Postman, right? He comes and says, you know what? We have all these gets and puts, but like we have no way of actually kind of building a testing scaffold, right? And it's very important because these days when you're doing these calls, the data is also not typed because you're using JSON, right? They're just pairs. It's just going back and forth and all kinds of nonsense happening. And if you do too many, and it's basically going to do larger transactions, and you have all these things, how do you test for it? So that's what I'm doing. I said, no one has thought about it yet because my thinking was someone would have done it. No? He says, no. I said, cool. I mean, API testing is a must, right? Especially
Right. Absolutely.
in a service-oriented architecture where you have REST APIs and you're not doing anything about it, right? And you're doing something, but you're doing it in a kludgy way for your own product, but it's not something which you can embrace. So that was cool. I said, great. I took them. I was mentoring Avinav, but I also took him to Helion. But unfortunately, we missed that boat because I couldn't invest as an angel, right? Because I was part of Helion. I had to take permission. And then we have an IC, so we missed that boat. But we got a couple of others like MoEngage, right? MoEngage is such a cool kind of product company. Again, what were they doing? They were saying that, listen, all these apps you're releasing, right? Think of it from a product manager standpoint. You're releasing all these apps, mobile apps. How do you know where the user is getting stuck? And
Right.
why do you have to follow the person home and find out, right? So can we
Right.
not build a small SDK, put it into the APK, release it, and during closed betas, open betas, closed alphas, open alphas, you're actually collecting information. UI,
Right.
UX. Such a cool company, right? I'm glad that we invested, both Helion and Ventureist invested in them. They're doing phenomenally well. Or
Yeah.
Darwin
Yeah.
Box, right? Darwin Box, why are we doing yet another HR product? Oh, we want to do an HR product which has to be lightweight. Okay, we don't want this humongous back office thing. It is lightweight, it's intuitive, right? You don't want something like a success factors, which became really great bunch
Correct.
of guys. So all of these we were there early on shaping the product, helping them rethink. Hasura was another one. They were doing some crazy services oriented work. And I said, listen, you can't do both. You have to just focus on this, build it out. You have a good bunch of guys, smart guys, just do it. Husband and wife team, okay? Tanmay and Rajshi, they knew each other from before, and somehow they worked well. I mean, it didn't affect them that they were husband and wife. Like when Usha and I used to be at HP, we made sure that we were not in the same division, right?
No, I think, but those are, some really great examples and stories, right? So, like kind of going a little deeper, you've been on the working with some of these big services organizations like HCL, and while you've also been working with startups very, very closely, right? In the current state of things, right? How do you see product thinking where India is thriving as a country? Do you see we are kind of in a maturity phase? We are kind of getting there because I also see a lot of service organizations trying to becoming product first, right?
Correct.
Coming up with their platforms
Actually,
and this
I
thing.
wrote an article. I wrote an article which is called "Continuity of SaaS"
Uh
and
huh.
its evolution. Right? It's there in LinkedIn. I will send you that link when I find
Okay.
it. Sometimes,
Sure.
or you could find it if you're LinkedIn with me, so you can just get it. That will give you an
Sure.
example of how I view the world. So what's going to end up happening, at least in my view, is even the services companies will become platform plays. And to build those platforms, they'll have to use components which are horizontal as well as
Right.
customized, right?
Right.
The customization piece will be the domain knowledge. The horizontal pieces will get standardized, okay?
Right.
So it'll all come together very, very fast and it'll typically be hosted somewhere, okay? because no one's going to actually kind of, either it'll be a private cloud or a hybrid cloud. That's where it's going to be. So you'll have to figure out what is the best. So a little bit of that. So you have to per se have that product oriented thinking or a solutions oriented thinking and customer oriented thinking. You can't just be saying, tell me what to do, I'll go code, right? That is all gone, right? And even the startups, at least the B2B startups, will become platform plays. In fact, D2C also, because they'll bring the customers in. The customers could be resellers, right? And they could be influencers. I see this whole world coming together in a beautiful way.
I agree.
I see education also happening that way, right? The issue we have is policies, and I keep coming back because what the government is very, very slow, and sometimes they appoint people who are actually previous generation, right? Look at the courses in product management. You look at the courses. See, naam ke vaste you can say product management course. Naam ke vaste you can say entrepreneurship course. But the people teaching you are not product managers or not entrepreneurs, really, right? And it's not immersive enough that. So my vision is I'm just my afterlife. I mean, I'm also after being a VC. I'm planning to actually be the advisor to this new school of AI and data sciences at IIT Madras, CFI in IIT Madras, Trust Lab for Digital Security in IIT Bombay. So all of these places, I'm going to bring in practical aspects into the course. Obviously, you have 30% which will be core, but 70% I want the kids to enjoy themselves with folks like me coming there through stories, through actual demos, startups coming there and working. So that is what I envision the world, right? And that's what we are planning to do at Persistent also.
Right.
Now
No, I think
I'm hoping that my colleagues at HCL will listen to this podcast and even Cognizant and Wipro and change, and Infi also. They should change.
yeah. I think there are a lot of folks who are trying to, make India ready to be the product nation, right? So I think it's kind of inching towards that. Yeah. So, Doctor, I think those were some really, very, very fantastic nuggets of wisdom. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and do some, like a short answer questions, which I would love to hear. See, today, if you look at it, I mean, as you said, India is kind of transforming in their value chain. And for us, product management, a lot of literature comes from Silicon Valley, right? Which I feel some of it needs to be probably rewritten in context of the Indian diaspora, the Indian audience, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you have to kind of have a blend of both.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the reason I say blend of both, because some problems are only applicable to India. So you
Right.
can't just say that I'll follow something in the valley and it'll work here. So I don't believe that. Okay. And I tell my valley buddies also, this is not the way, because they'll say, hey, it's solved here. I said, no, I'll give you one example, right? Okay. Uber said, I will come and I'll set up in India, right? They've done. But I said, you forgot one thing. Uber is a shared economy product. Okay. And India is not shared economy because 77% of the vehicles are underutilized in the US and owned, and they don't need licenses. You can actually have them driving around. Right? India, you have cab operators, right? What does Uber do? Oh, shoot, I completely missed this, right? So it took them about a year to figure out what was going on, right? Before they got it all right, and how to interface with the government, how to interface with the taxi unions, how do you get those guys on board? So I'm just saying, you need a blend of both.
Correct. Agreed. I mean, I think we need to definitely relook at some of those nuances. The other question I would have is that being a GP at Venture East, when a startup reaches out to you, what are some key things that you look at to invest in the startup?
So I think it's the usual formula. I mean, it's not going to be very different for other VCs. I look at it slightly differently because I'm a techie and an entrepreneur. So I kind of gauge things differently. Other guys who are purely fund managers will probably have a couple of people like me to whom they go to. So I don't have that issue. I have the luxury of using myself.
Yeah.
So the first thing is it has to be a big problem, okay, that they're solving. Not nice to have, but a must have. The second thing is I look at the team to see how passionate they are, what they've been doing, have they been working together, is there chemistry? Because if that's not there, everything stutters, right? Third thing I look at is some validation in terms of traction. Can I talk to some of your customers? Can I talk to the extended ecosystem? And the fourth thing I look at is what is the jigar hai kya? Jazbaat hai kya? Have you put your own money? Have you put in your own sweat, right? If those
Yeah.
four things come together, then it's a thumbs up from my side, and I move forward, right? Uh, Mostly. I mean, sometimes there are exceptions where the idea is still not flushed out, but those are rare because happen to know the entrepreneur from a previous. So if he's a serial guy and I've done something with him before, I will give him a little bit luxury, right? Or her a little bit luxury. So otherwise, this
Yep.
is the formula. And sometimes I'll spend 15 months with them. They might get pained with me also, right? But the thing is, the VC world is slightly different. I try to explain it to people, right? When you're launching a product, you have very little time, you're taking decisions, you got to push it out. In a VC world, you have tons of data,
Correct.
okay? And you have to decide very deliberately because it's not your own money, it's your LP's money. And there's a 10-year commitment, and there's an ROI commitment, right? So sometimes my friends will also say, "Hey, tum log bahut slow. Don't turn." I said, like, boss, this is not like a candy shop where here's money, I hand it out to you, right? So
Yeah,
even when the
exactly.
Startup India, SISF, and Atal Innovation, I go and tell the people who are administering it, it is a taxpayer's money. So you make sure that it is used wisely, not just
Correct.
spread out.
With more power comes more responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, absolutely. And how do you see these technology trends? They influencing the product managers' roles in India.
Absolutely, it's a continuous thing. You're basically kind of drinking from the fire hydrant because technology is moving fast. Okay, frameworks are moving fast. Okay, business models also shifting, right?
Correct.
And it's no longer one set of customers. It could be an ecosystem. So each one has different needs, right? So it has become fairly complex. I mean, it's not simple, and I'm glad that more colleges are offering or universities are offering these courses or IIMs are offering it, but it's not done to my satisfaction. It has to be a little bit more immersive, right?
Hmm.
Because it's not easy for anyone to see if you wear a classic product management hat and you work for McAfee in the US and you come here, you're completely lost when you're working in a startup, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
everything has changed, including
No, I
how,
agree with you.
yeah, including the
Yes.
CTO.
It has to be
CTO has
very
to be
immersive. It has to be very experiential.
yeah. Let's take see. I talk about product management. I talk about CTOs. CTOs, if they don't have a business sense, they have no. They don't belong in a startup. End of story.
Agreed. All right. Yes, Maya, those were some really great pointers. Thank you.
Product Talk with Malti.